as Katrina said, today we're going to be looking at the area profile reports that cover Hampshire, the Solent and Berkshire. There are 4 reports and we won't have time to go through all of them in a huge amount of detail, but the data that's presented in them is exactly the same in each report. So we'll look at one in more detail and then you'll be able to use the others as relevant. As was said, you do have access to reports that cover the whole of the southeast region. So for those of you who might be right on the border of any one of the area profiles, you have access to others which join on, so you can see the wider reach of who might be coming to your museums. So we'll have a quick introductory round table, and then we'll look at the information that's in the engagement area profile reports, and we'll have a little explore of the reports themselves, so you can see how the data is laid out, how you read the various tables and so on that are in there. And then we'll have a look at audience spectrum segmentation, because for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it is one of the really useful data sets that's in the area profile report. So we'll have a look at those in a bit more detail. And then at the end of the slide set, and you will get this following the session, there's a whole load of resources and links to further information that you might find useful, and also my contact details, so that if you have any questions remaining after the session, or if anything comes up when you start to look at the area profile reports, please don't hesitate to get in touch. So, quick introduction to the Audience Agency for those of you who aren't familiar with us. We work right across the country and internationally with a whole range of different arts and cultural organisations of different sizes and governances, different art forms. And essentially our role is to help organisations use data to build relationships with their existing and potential audiences, to really, maximise their potential to achieve the objectives that they have across a range of different activities. My role is within the consultancy team. So we have a team of consultants, we have researchers, and we also have our audience finder platform team. And we all work together really to help organisations take an informed approach to how they develop their audiences. And as I say, build those really meaningful relationships with the people that they engage. So over the past 18 months, the sorts of questions that people have been asking have changed significantly due to the impact of the pandemic. And these are some of the burning questions that are coming up through the conversations that we're having with different organisations at the moment, largely around the relationship between physical and digital audiences, how they might generate income, because particularly for museums and heritage, they've been really hard hit, as you will no doubt all know, through that loss of the sort of secondary spend through their shops and cafes and things like that. And also how to engage people in local communities that perhaps haven't engaged previously. And for museums who have relied on a sort of domestic tourism or international tourism for their audiences, which I think is particularly relevant for organisations with a very specialist offer. So perhaps bringing in special interest groups from different areas of the country and international visitors as well. They are more now turning towards their local audiences because people aren't travelling as far. And they are looking for, what's on their doorstep, what they can do, what they can engage with locally. But what I would like to hear from you is, what are your burning questions? So if we could just go round the group, and if you could just introduce yourself and the museum that you're representing today, and then perhaps just one burning question that you feel has come up recently, or is a recurrent question that is asked that you've not perhaps been able to answer. and we'll see what's going on in your museums. What are your burning questions? And I'm going to start with Catherine, because you are centre of my screen, so sorry to pick on you. And once you've introduced yourself, if you could nominate the next person, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, so I have recently joined the New Forest Heritage Centre down obviously in New Forest and Lyndhurst. First observations seem to be that majority, don't know numbers of our visitors are actually from outside the area because they happen to be passing through. And so one of the things I will be looking at, or I want to look at, is how do we re-engage our local audience, and also what's local in terms of, are we just talking about our, the local village, or do we extend as far afield as Southampton, depending on what the activities are. So yeah, early days, but yes, this is going to hopefully inform those decisions along the way. So I can't see anybody. Let me see. I'm going to go for Ruth Taylor at the Royal Green Jackets.
Thank you, Catherine. So yes, I'm a trustee. I'm Ruth Taylor. I'm a trustee at the Royal Green Jackets Museum, and I particularly advise on interpretation there. I'm also a strategic manager for arts work, which covers the south east, and I cover Berkshire, Oxfordshire, Buckinghamshire and Milton Keynes. So I'm also working with museums in that patch. So for the Royal Green Jackets, our burning question is, how can we better engage local families? We're particularly keen to think about that family audience, and to better engage them.
Thank you.
Oh, and I'll nominate, hang on, just scroll up, Chris Mason. Oh no, maybe Chris isn't such a good one. Judith Carruthers.
Yeah, I don't think I'm such a good one either, because I'm a colleague of Chris's, actually, Ruth, and I was just trying to work out how to rename myself. Yeah, I'm Judith Carruthers. I'm an engagement manager with National Lottery Heritage Fund. And I attended the Kent one because my sort of watching briefs and engagement managers over Kent and Hampshire. And what's really useful for me is to see the sort of questions that are coming out here, because for us, our mandatory outcome is a wider range of people will be involved with heritage. And we can see it's something that organisations struggle with. So this piece of work the South East Museums are doing with the Audience Agency is really key, I think, to helping people get the evidence so they can see who they currently engage with and how they can try and engage new audiences. So for me, I'm just really interested in the actual profiles themselves, but also people's questions generally. And actually, I'm really struggling with my view. I can't actually see anyone, so I can only see Katrina and Stephen, and I don't think either of them need to be introduced. So I'd really appreciate, Jackie, could you nominate someone else, please, for me?
Sure. How about Jessica?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
So my name's Jessica. I'm the marketing assistant here at Chawton House. My burning question is quite similar to a lot of you. So how can we better engage those in our local area, and particularly local families, in light of, again, COVID? We have quite a lot of international visitors usually, again, from America, in regards to our Jane Austen connection. So how can we keep interacting with those local audiences going forward? And I will nominate, trying to work out who hasn't spoken yet, if I can nominate Hannah Grigson.
Hi, I'm a marketing and events officer at the Army Flying Museum. I work with Joe, who's the other Army Flying Museum person on this course, conference, whatever you call it. I guess my burning question would be sort of how we did quite a lot of work through lockdown engaging digital audiences, but it's translating that to get them to come and visit the museum. We're just doing our first lecture, which will have an audience both in the museum and go out online. We're charging for people to watch the lecture in the museum, but we're not charging them to watch online. We're hoping they're going to donate. So it's just sort of looking at that that balance between online and in-person audiences and how we get that right. I think that's it.
Great, thank you.
Oh, just lost my screen. I don't know if Joe wants to add anything.
Hello, I'm Joe. I'm mostly on a observing level, I think, here, and this is going to be echo, isn't it? That's fine. Good. Just we know where people come from when they come to the museums. We've got annual passes, so we kind of know, you know, what the location is. We want to sort of see how it's going to work for us, what we can do to get these audiences and get these people into through our doors. But like I say, I'm very much of a novice in this area. I can't see. Who can I nominate? Sorry. Let me see. I'll make a bigger screen up. Sonia. There we go. Sonia Raspberry.
Thank you.
Sorry.
That's okay. I'm here in a slightly kind of wide role. I work with museums. I'm a freelance consultant, and I'm particularly doing some work with the Diving Museum at the moment. And we're putting in a Heritage Lottery application. And one of the things that I'm just thinking at the moment is just looking at that overall evidence about audiences and how that's changed because of the pandemic. So because we've been working on the application for a while, so I just reflecting and re-emphasising a lot of what Judith was saying, really, just about that general information about audiences and how they might have changed. So.
Great, thank you. I think we've heard from everybody. Has anyone not had the? Oh, Janine, I don't think we've heard from you.
A little bit.
Hi, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes, okay, great. Hi, my name's Janine. I'm curator at West Berkshire Museum. We're located in Newbury. I mean, we know nuggets of information about our visitors pre-COVID, but we haven't been great in recent years at doing kind of consistent audience research and development work, and it's something that we want to build on and improve on. But we do target events and activities at families. We're a very family orientated museum. So I guess really it's kind of who could we be reaching in our local community and ways in which we might be able to do that.
Lovely, thank you. And then I think Christine is the last person that we've not heard from. Christine, can you hear us? Ooh. I think we may have lost Christine, unfortunately. Not to worry, that's great. Thank you very much. And I think thinking about the data that's in the profile reports, I think will help you with answering or going some way to answering quite a lot of those questions. So that's great. And also I can assure you that you are not alone in asking those questions. There is a lot of consistency through the other sessions that we've been running as part of this programme, that these burning questions are, you know, quite common to other museums as well. So without further ado, hopefully, oh, my screen appears to not want to move forward. There we go. So let's start to have a look at the information that you can find in your area profiles. And I think it's worth pointing out that the Engagement Area Profile Report Plus, which is the reports that you have access to, they are our most detailed and comprehensive profile reporting. There's a lot of information in there, and it's really worth spending a bit of time to explore the different data sets. And also to emphasize that as a tool, it's of most use when you use it in conjunction with your existing local area knowledge, because you work in these areas, the communities and the neighborhoods. So use it as one tool in your arsenal of information, so that you can use it really to inform that strategic planning. So use it alongside what you already know about the people who are visiting you, to identify those gaps between who's in the local population and the people that you see coming through the door. So in the reports that you have, this is the data that's included in them. So you have demographics and cultural engagement, so what people are actually doing. There's license data from Experian, which is that sort of consumer lifestyle information. And there's also our own audience spectrum profiling, and also information from the Office for National Statistics. And in the engagement area profile reports, there are summaries which include further information on levels of disability and health, family groups, different ages of the population, and what the local communities look like, and indices for multiple deprivation as well. So if you are targeting particular communities within your local population, it can really help you identify who are the groups who are there, who might benefit most from any engagement that you want to do with them. And it can help you be really targeted about that. Now, all of your area profile reports, alongside the catchment area, there is a base population, and the base population for all of these reports is the whole of the Southeast region. So you can look at your catchment area in relation to what the sort of broader Southeast region looks like. And these are the 4 reports in this particular cohort. So there's Berkshire, Portsmouth, Southampton and South Hampshire, which I will refer to as Solent as a shorthand, the Isle of Wight and Central and North Hampshire. And I think many of you will fall into the Central and North Hampshire catchment area, but as I say, each one borders on the next area, so you might want to look at more than one catchment area, depending on what your strategies are for reaching perhaps further afield and your hyperlocal audiences. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start sharing one of the area profile reports so that we can go through it in detail. Hopefully you can all see that one. So as I say, because many of you fall into this Central Hampshire and North Hampshire profile, I'll look at this one first, although we will have a quick look at the others as well, so you can see the differences. So the first page just shows you the catchment area of your profile report. And also, because this is an area profile report plus, it will take the information down to ward level. So it's really detailed and granular about those local areas. And these are the different wards within the catchment that you have the data for. The next tab just gives you a map of all the different information. You can see there's a lot of information in these area profiles, and I'm aware we will be looking at quite a lot of information in a relatively short space of time this morning. So as I say, once you've had a chance to explore the reports, if there's anything that's not clear or you have any questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch after the session. The first set of data is around your audience spectrum profile, and as I say, we will have a look at this in a bit more detail later, but essentially it gives you an overview of who are the most prominent segments in your catchment area, and then it gives you a table of proportions and counts. And throughout the report, you will see these index tables. And essentially, if something is under indexing, it will be in blue, and it'll be on the left-hand side of this central point. If it's over indexing, i.e. there are more people in your catchment area than are found in the base population, it will be over indexing and it will be into the red to the right hand side there. So that's just to give you an idea of how your catchment compares with the base comparator. There's then a section on arts attendance. This comes from the target group index information, which is a sort of MORI poll that's conducted on a regular basis across the country. So it's a UK population panel survey. It gets lots of people to contribute. What I would say is that although it's useful information, I would take it with a small pinch of salt, because this is what people say they do. And sometimes people are a little bit over optimistic about what they've actually done, or they remember slightly wrongly. So take this in conjunction with the audience spectrum profiling, which is a lot of that data is driven from information about what people are actually doing. So survey and ticketing data, for example, from arts and cultural organisations. So sometimes it's a little bit optimistic, this information, but still useful. And the next set of tabs are around the demographics. As I say, each of these tables at the top bring out the sort of key findings from each of the area profiles. So it'll tell you, you know, what age people tend to be, their ethnic backgrounds, and you know what the different divisions are, and also statistics around their health as well. This is all driven by census population data. So it goes into a lot of detail about all of these different metrics. You can see the index tables here, as I explained before. So there's a lot of granular information in here. And depending on the sort of activities you're planning and the type of audiences you want to target, you know, each of these may be relevant to you at different times. And then as we go through the tabs, there's more information about social grade based on the Office for National Statistics NSSEC gradings, which brings in employment and qualifications. And again, a lot of detail on this, which may or may not be relevant to different activities that you're planning. Then there's information about country of birth, language and religion, which again can be really useful for targeting particular community groups in your areas. I'm aware that I'm skimming through a lot of this, but it's really just to show you the level of detail that's in here. And it goes right down to the bottom there. And the household tab, I think, is one which is particularly relevant for museums and heritage sites, because many museums have quite a significant family offer, and a number of you mentioned that interest in local families, for example, in those burning questions that you have. So this tab gives you a lot of information about the household makeup of the people in the catchment area. So it'll tell you the proportions of families with dependent children living at home, for example. And then it will also tell you the ages of those children. So when you're thinking about your family programming, you can start to think about, you know, are you aiming at early years? Is that the predominant profile of the households in your catchment? Are you looking at, you know, multi-generational activities, if there are a lot of, you know, mixed age groups in the household makeup. So it can help you to really understand, you know, if you were offering something for families, but actually there aren't a high proportion of families in your immediate catchment area, then you can think about where you might need to draw them in from, for example. And it really means that you can plan with confidence, knowing that there is an audience for the programme that you want to offer. And you know, you can make best use of the resources and the time that you have to really focus on the people who are most likely to engage with the activity. So there's lots of information here about those different family groupings and how many children are in the family, what ages they are, and also it brings in those indices of multiple deprivation as well, so you can see levels of deprivation in your catchment as well. So, for example, if part of your purpose and mission is around outreach and social responsibility priorities that you might have, again, you can be really targeted about the areas that you work in and the different neighbourhoods that you go to. And this last bit, the counts and percentages, this is where the information becomes extremely detailed. So if we look at percentages, for all of those metrics that we've just looked at, you can look at each of those at a ward level. Because although the overall profile for your catchment might have, you know, particular family groups as prominent or particular audience spectrum groups as prominent, for example, when you look at a particular ward area, it may be that that looks quite different to the area as a whole. So again, you can be really targeted about the regions that you work in and the different groups that you're targeting. So, for example, if we just have a very quick look at, let's have a look at age groups here. And go back to the beginning of the age groups. So let's pick on one that looks a bit different. So you can see some of these. This ward, for example, when you start looking at Eastdrop, you've got quite a significantly younger audience in this area than the catchment as a whole. So although only 5% in the catchment are aged 25 to 29, 15% in this particular ward are. So again, when you're looking to engage particular age groups or particular types of audience, you can look to see where they are and whether they are actually in your local area or whether you need to reach a little bit further if you wanted to engage with them. Does anyone have any questions at this point about all of that? Any of that? Any thoughts or comments? No, I've stunned you all to silence. I'm aware there's quite a lot in there to think about, so it's not surprising. But if we can have a look at perhaps have a look at Berkshire, just to show you that all of the information in each of the reports is presented in exactly the same way, and you read all of the tables in the same way. Whichever area you're looking at. So here we go. So this is the Berkshire catchment, and again, it's got all of the same tabs, all of those same little digests at the top of each of the tables to tell you what the sort of key figures are for each of those metrics, and it goes through all of the same information. And again, right down to the percentages and the counts for each ward. And I think it is important sometimes to think about the counts as well as the percentages, because although percentages can be easier to read and understand, even if the percentage of families, for example, within a particular ward are low, that can still mean that that's quite a lot of families to think about. So the count can still be quite large, even if the percentage is small. So it's worth thinking about the balance of those two things as well. Oh, I can see a couple of questions coming up. Oh, no, that's apologies. Not to worry. Okay. So that is all of the information that you can find in your engagement area profiles, and as you can see, there's a lot of it. So it is worth taking a little bit of time to explore the reports and really think about which bits of the data are going to be useful for you, and how you might want to use them. So I'm going to go back to my slide set now. Okay. So one of the things that I talked about in that, when we were looking at those, sorry, can you see that? Can everyone see the slides? Okay, cool. One of the things I talked about in the data that's in the area profile report is audience spectrum profiling. Now, I don't know how familiar anyone is with audience spectrum. Has anyone used it before or come across it? No, it's absolutely fine if you haven't. It's a useful tool. For anyone who hasn't used audience spectrum or any form of segmentation before, I think it's important to think about segmentation not as a process of stereotyping or ignoring the fact that we are all individuals with individual preferences and needs and so on, but it looks for things that we have in common within a particular context or setting. And for audience spectrum, that context is cultural engagement. So it looks at what people have in common in terms of their relationship with arts and culture, how they engage with it, their opportunities to engage, and some of the barriers they might face for doing that. And a couple of the things that I think are really important about the segmentation are that it makes no value judgments about the types of arts and culture that people enjoy or their reasons for doing so. So it looks at a whole range of different art forms and different ways to engage with arts and culture, including museums and heritage, and you know, the reasons why they actually do that, and also their access to opportunities to do so. And it also recognises that everybody engages with culture to one extent or another, but some people have more opportunities to do so and other people face more barriers which might prevent them from doing that. But you know, whether it's you know, going regularly to your local museum, or whether it's, you know, doing something at home, everybody engages with culture to some extent or another. For some people it's more important, it plays a bigger role in their life than others. And in building the audience spectrum profiling, we brought in some really large national data sets. So it's a population segmentation. It covers the whole of the UK. And some of those data sets were things like the Taking Part survey, which captures information about how people feel about arts and cultural activity and the value that they place on it, in addition to how frequently they take part in various different activities. It brings in Experian consumer data and also census data, census population data, which means that the segmentation can also be used alongside other systems which are sometimes used by local authorities, like mosaic profiling, for example, and also population data. And we also ran a panel survey to dig deeper into what sorts of things people like to do and why they like to do it. And it's the system as a whole is continually being tested through our Audience Finder platform to see if people are actually engaging in the way that we expect them to. So it's a live segmentation as well. And essentially, bringing together all of that data meant that we could segment the UK population into 10 distinct and locatable groups based on their preferences, their opportunities, and their barriers to engaging with different sorts of arts and culture. And those 10 groups are 3 higher engaged, groups, 3 medium engaged groups, and 4 lower engaged groups. And every household in the country belongs to one of those segments, depending on all of those different variables. So that's all of the data sources that we used to build the segmentation. And just to have a quick look in more detail at these different segment groups. So these are the 3 higher engaged groups, and essentially they represent a relatively low proportion of the population, but a high proportion of audiences across all art forms. So they are overrepresented in audience profiles in almost every type of arts and cultural activity. What they have in common is that arts and culture play an important part in their lives, and it's like part of their identity. They're very well informed, and they live within easy reach of a wide range of different activities that are open to them. So they have lots of opportunity to engage, and they do so frequently and regularly. There are differences between the different groups, so they have different preferences and so on. And for example, experience seekers is the youngest segment out of all of the 10. The next set of segments are the medium engaged groups, and these are sort of closer to representational levels in terms of the population and audiences, although they still occur slightly higher in the population. And they do account for the highest proportion of the UK population overall. And you can find them in rural areas and suburban towns and small cities right across the country. What they have in common is that they are all drawn to more traditional offers, so something that's known and trusted. And often they're not within easy reach of an offer on their doorstep. Or perhaps they don't, or they didn't pre-COVID, they didn't really explore what was on their doorstep in any great detail. They tended to go further afield. But again, there are differences between the different groups. And one of the segments which is particularly relevant for museums is trips and treats, because that's a family group. And also home and heritage, because they are traditional museum visitors. There's a high proportion of National Trust and English Heritage membership, for example, within that segment. And then lastly, there are the 4 lower engaged groups, and they are much higher in the population than in audience profiles. And in contrast to the higher engaged groups, they are underrepresented in almost every art form across different audiences. What they have in common is that they face a range of quite significant barriers to engagement, and they can be physical barriers, financial barriers, but also things that are perhaps a little less tangible, so a lack of confidence or a lack of awareness of what's available to them. And one of the key things for these groups is that in addition to not knowing what to expect from an offer, because it's perhaps they're not regular museum visitors, they're not really sure what the experience might be like, but also what might be expected of them in those different situations. So if they have children, for example, and the children are noisy and want to run around, are they going to feel embarrassed? Are they going to be asked to leave? These things are quite significant barriers for some people to engage. So when you start to think about the messaging that you put out about your offer, it's really worth thinking about these different groups and what information they need to know in order to give them the confidence to attend and to feel comfortable. With these groups in particular, it can be useful to look for trusted voices within their communities. So community leaders, or perhaps work in partnership with libraries, which are seen as sort of safe spaces within communities, or with faith groups and things like that. But again, there are differences within each of these groups in terms of their needs and their preferences. Facebook families, for example, as the name suggests, are a family segment. Heydays is the oldest segment group. And I think it's worth sort of saying that along with all of the other segments, people may fall into a different segment at different points in their lifetime. So for Heydays, they may have been much more highly engaged earlier on in life, but now they're older, they tend to be living in assisted housing or in care homes. So they face very significant physical barriers to getting out and about. So to work with them might need a bit of outreach to go to where they are. Obviously, you know, during COVID and in this post-COVID environment, that's not been possible. But the lower engagement, and this is true of all of the lower engaged groups, the fact that they don't engage more highly is not an indication that they're not interested. You know, they just need further support in order to access different offers. So I think that's all worth bearing in mind. And for each of these segments on the audience agency website, you can get a huge amount of information about them. So there's lots of layers of information in our online pen portraits. And this includes their interests, and that goes into things that they do outside of arts and cultural attendance as well. So think, you know, are they more interested in doing things around the home? Do they go out and about? You know, are they interested in sports and things like that? So that you can start to think about how you might tap into those wider interests if they haven't got a sort of natural leaning towards a museum offer. Also their preferences for what they like to do. Do they like visiting museums? Are they, you know, do they go to the theatre? Do they attend libraries? You know, all sorts of different activities that they might get engaged in. Routes to engaging with them. So what sort of messaging they're most likely to respond to, what channels they tend to use to find out information about things to do. Also where they are in the country, so their geographical location. And also for each of the segments, there's a statistical download which gives you a lot of different metrics and compares the segment you're looking at with the rest of the population. So whether they're more or less likely, for example, to become donors and supporters of a museum, or whether they're more or less likely to attend as a family and things like that. So there's a lot of information in there, excuse me, that you may find useful for informing both your programming but also your marketing and messaging. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. Again, as with the area profiles, it's worth spending a bit of time exploring those segments and really getting to grips with the ones which are important for you in your local area. And to look at those, so I had a look at the different profiles. And as you can see, there are some groups which are more predominant in the southeast regions. And you'll see those coming up in the base population for the region as a whole as well. So for the southeast region overall, the most prominent segments are commuter land culture buffs, dormitory dependables, and trips and treats. But each area, as you can see, has a distinct profile. So even within these four groupings, there are differences in the most prominent segment groups in the area. And that's even before you go down to the ward level, when, you know, again, the population starts to look slightly different. So, for example, if you look at the Solent group, the top three are trips and treats, experience seekers, and dormitory dependables. But if you look in at Portsmouth in the Nelson ward, 30% of the people living in that ward belong to the lower engaged up our street segment, which doesn't even appear in those top 3 for the region as a whole. But is really significant for that particular local neighbourhood. So that's when it's really important to look at that ward level information to really understand what the population in that area looks like. And you will notice that on the whole, any of the more urban or more heavily populated areas within the catchment area, so cities and larger towns, are likely to have a population profile which is slightly different to the areas surrounding it, because there's sort of more diversity. There's a larger population in a smaller area. Stephen, thank you for that question. In terms of segments which are likely to have families, so the 2 key family segments are trips and treats and Facebook families. They're the 2 segments which are most likely to have dependent children living at home. Some of the other segments do have older families, and they may still attend as older family groups. But if you're thinking about families as having children under 16, for example, those are the 2 segments which are most likely to have those, along with kaleidoscope creativity, which don't really appear in many southeast profiles of London. They're a very urban group, so they're found in larger cities and conurbations, and they're the most diverse of the segments. They're a lower engaged group, but they represent a whole range of different life stages and family groupings, with a lot of multi-generational families in that group. Does that answer your question, Stephen?
Yeah, no, that's helpful. I mean, I can imagine going through the segment percentages, and I think a couple of people said they wanted to engage with their local families, and obviously, I suppose doing a tour of the wards that are sort of nearer them. Yes. Would be to sort of start looking for wards with above average trips and treats and Facebook families.
Absolutely. And what you can do is you can combine the census data about the age groups of children with that segmentation profile, so you can understand both the ages of the children, but also what those families are looking for. Because as I'm sure you will have come across, although at their sort of basic level, all families, regardless of their levels of engagement, have some basic hygiene needs in terms of a family-friendly welcome and particular facilities and so on. In terms of, you know, their reasons for engaging, they might be quite different. So some might be looking for opportunities for sort of shared learning or building on what their children are learning in school, whereas others may be looking for, you know, a guaranteed good time, you know, fun for the family, because their main motivation for engagement is to spend time with each other and actually, you know, have an enjoyable experience. So that's why it's important to sort of start layering up all of the information that you have available to you through the reports, to really take an informed approach to the sorts of programming that you might want to do. And you might want to, you know, to think about a range of different activities, or even the same activity but presented in slightly different ways for different audiences, to really tap into what's important to them and what they need to know. So by looking at the detailed information in the pen portraits, you can really start to get to grips with that and what each of these different segments might be looking for. So we're going to have a look at some of those key segments in a bit more detail now, so that you can understand the sorts of information that you'll get once you start looking at the profiles. So commuter and culture buffs, as I say, really prominent segment in the southeast generally, and also one of the key audiences for museums and heritage, particularly pre-pandemic, but you know, even now, if you have commuter and culture buffs in your local area, they can be a really important audience for museum and heritage offer. They're an older group. They've been quite hard hit by COVID because of their age. They've been at a higher risk health-wise, but financially they haven't been impacted. Many of them are retired, so they've not been, you know, their income hasn't been impacted by COVID. They have a preference for museum and heritage offers, and they have always been a very reliable group in terms of supporting those museum and heritage organisations through individual giving particularly, but also through secondary spend. So if they come to visit you, they're most likely to, you know, look for something to buy, particularly original works of art or arts and crafts and things like that. So for museums, I know a lot of museums now have local art, you know, the work of local artists and craftspeople available as part of their sort of shop offer. That's something that they've always been really attracted to, they also, they're the group who are most likely to say that arts and culture is an important part of who they are. And they really, you know, they really value the role that it plays in their lives, but they also feel that it's an enriching thing for everybody. So they're very keen to support organisations in delivering that sort of offer. So even if they, you know, they're not back to visiting at full strength yet, they're still keen to support their local organisation. So that's something to think about if you're planning fundraising or membership campaigns, for example. So they're not returning in the high numbers that we saw pre-COVID because of their age. They would have been travelling further, as their name suggests. One thing I should say about the naming conventions of segments is that they're always a bit clunky, and not to worry too much about the individual namings. They're really just there to represent the key characteristics of any particular group. And this group, one of their key things was that they travelled quite a lot. They don't live in larger towns and cities, but they're within easy reach, easy commuter links to that sort of wider cultural offer. But what we see now is that they are more and more looking for things that are right on their doorstep. So, you know, you may have an opportunity to build your audience with this particular group. Experience seekers, as I mentioned, are the youngest segment, and in contrast to commuter land culture buffs, although they are also a highly engaged group, what they're looking for is, you know, something new, something different, a bit quirky, somewhere where they can have a social experience with their friends. So things like museum late offers, where there's, you know, perhaps music and food and drink, are you know, a key thing for this group to engage them with a museum offer, for example. Excuse me. They're not particularly venue loyal because of this appetite for new things all the time. So you know, you might engage them through a particular activity, but in order to keep them engaged, you would have to have quite a vibrant sort of program. So it's often helpful to work in partnership, perhaps with other organisations or other arts providers, for example, to support ongoing programming to keep them keen. They're also a very key audience for online activity. They were already highly digitally engaged pre-pandemic. They continued to engage throughout lockdowns, and you know, going into the future, there's no reason to expect their behaviours to change. They do pay for online engagement as well, but the key thing for this group is that they're not looking for the delivery of something online that they might otherwise have engaged with in person. They're looking for things that really exploit the potential of digital engagement. So, you know, things that, activities that are born digital rather than something that's been translated from an in-person activity to delivery online. So again, thinking about, you know, new and different and experimental things that might engage them. Dormitory Dependables are a really important group for lots of different arts and cultural organisations. They often live in areas where they don't have a lot of opportunity to engage right on their doorstep, so they do have to travel a little bit further. Otherwise they might do more if there was more available to them locally, but they do have a slight skew towards heritage and mainstream arts offers, and they've been one of the groups that has been actively seeking to return to activity post-COVID, and were one of the earliest groups to start visiting outdoor heritage offers, for example, following the first lockdown, when heritage gardens and things were given that early opening opportunity. Lots of people from this segment started to take advantage of that. They're mostly mature couples and some older families, but they tend to have children who have left home rather than being still dependent. Again, this is a group which is quite likely to donate to heritage organisations, and they tend to be, fairly comfortably off. But there may be some hesitancy over that post-COVID if their own income has been hit through redundancy, for example. And around a third of them have seen a decrease in income post-COVID. Particularly because they might have expected to have been at their sort of peak earning years. So any unexpected loss of income might make them a little bit more cautious about individual giving. Yes, so they have taken up some online activity, but we think, from their other behaviours, that's likely to dwindle going forward. They're more likely to return to in-person visiting as soon as they can and they feel comfortable to do that. And again, they're a group that are, actively looking for things to do in their local areas. Trips and treats are likely to be a very significant segment for many of you. Because not only are they a family segment, but they're also very drawn to museum offers because it's something that they're familiar with and they know what to expect from a museum visit. They're not motivated by engagement with arts and culture for its own sake. What they are looking for is an opportunity to spend time with their friends and family groups. So that's something they've really missed during COVID, is that opportunity to get together and enjoy a day out, essentially. And they are looking for the sort of whole offer. So they wouldn't expect to spend their whole day visiting a museum or a heritage site. So what they're looking for is what other things are there for them to do in the local area. So when you're thinking about your messaging, that's the sort of way to position it, is in terms of, if you come to visit us, there's all these other things that you can do. There are all these places to eat and drink, and if there's a shopping offer near you as well. They like to combine lots of different activities within the day, but they are very keen again to start getting out and about and meeting up with their friends and family again. Up our street feature in a number of your profiles in terms of the lower engaged groups. And they tend to be in sort of outlying neighbourhoods of towns and smaller cities. They're more likely to spend their spare time at home, so on DIY and gardening and things like that, but they do like to socialise with their friends and neighbours. There are a few households within this group with dependent children living at home, but they're not as high as the Facebook families, for example, which are a much more family orientated group. They always needed extra support to engage with a formal sort of cultural offer, but the COVID impact on this group has been really high. So they've been at risk both health-wise and economically. Many of them are over 50 and a significant proportion have long-term health and mobility issues. So 44% of this group identifies having a long-term health condition that impacts on their day-to-day activities. Most of them are living on average or below average incomes, and many of them were in service industry roles. So they've been, very heavily impacted by COVID in terms of, some of them have been on long-term furlough, many of them have been made redundant. And the data that we have shows that almost a third have less disposable income as a result of the pandemic, and they were already low to begin with. So, that's been a significant impact for them. And also almost a quarter of them have been shielding throughout the pandemic. So they have, they've been dealing with a lot of different issues. So thinking about how you might want to engage that group, they are going to need quite a lot of reassurance around, that there are no hidden costs if you're offering a free activity, for example, that there are COVID safety measures in place. And again, thinking about what they might expect from the experience, what will they get out of it if they come and engage with you. Outdoor opportunities are really very popular with this group. They're seen as quite low risk, something that they can turn up to, and if they don't feel it's quite for them, they can drift off again without feeling self-conscious about it. Also things with low or no cost attached as well will help them to feel more confident about engaging. So that's that group. Any questions at this point about the different segments? Do any of them look familiar to you in terms of the sorts of people that they're describing? Are these people that you see coming through your door? Any thoughts?
We're doing all right because we're cheap. So our numbers are back up to what they were pre-COVID, actually.
Fantastic.
Right. And especially when we put on a free bus ride from the ferry, we had 50 waiting at the door the minute we opened. So if you're cheap and no extras, yeah, you're all right.
Fantastic. And also that extra support as well with the transport, that can really help. Do you get a sense that they're local people returning, or are they coming from further afield?
We haven't asked that question. I suppose we should have. We did have a survey ready to put out, but just been so busy. Because a lot of our volunteers haven't come back and won't come back till next year. So there's been a big demand on a few that will do it. So we did want to do a survey. I would say most of them are local or locals that have, because we're a seaside location, there's a lot of people from London and other areas that do visit. So yeah, we do have a number that come from other parts of the country. That's because they're brought down here because of where we're located, by the sea.
Sure. So you may be benefiting from people not going abroad.
Yes,
during the summer,
yes, and definitely, without a doubt, cost us a lot, and our shop sales have gone up a lot.
Ah, fantastic.
We don't have a big shop. We have a cheap shop. And a lot of things within £1 to £3 that children want. So, and yeah, we've done quite well for us. A small museum, we've done well out of that.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I think it really shows the importance of sort of understanding how your offer meets the needs of the people who might want to visit you as well.
100%. You've got to understand how people are reacting to what's happened to them over the last 12 months financially and experience-wise.
Definitely. And one of the data sources that we use, that I was, some of the information related to the segment, is an ongoing piece of research that we've been conducting called the Cultural Participation Monitor. that we've been running in partnership with the Arts and Humanities Research Council. And I think we're into the 5th wave of research at this point. And we started collecting data in between the 1st and 2nd lockdowns. And we've been publishing sort of digest reports on each wave of research from that point onwards. There's a link that I've included in this slide set to those, to the reports on the data that's coming out. But essentially it's tracking the behaviour of people and how confident they feel and what they feel they need to encourage them to return to visiting, along with the impacts of COVID, looking at it across different demographics and also by different audience spectrum segment breakdown as well. So you can really start to understand how the pandemic has impacted on different people in different ways, what they're looking for now, how ready they are to return and what they might need to encourage them, make them feel comfortable.
One thing you can add to that, because a lot of families are not going overseas, they're giving loaning their grandchildren to their grandparents, their children to the grandparents, and the grandparents want somewhere that's not too expensive to take them out and something the children enjoy. So I think that's one you should cater for.
Definitely, and I think museums are in a perfect position to do that because, on the whole, people do know what to expect from a museum, perhaps more so than other types of activity. So it can fall into that idea of a sort of guaranteed good day out for people. Brilliant, thank you very much. That's great. So in terms of what you can do next with all of this data, and I am aware that this is a lot of information and time is one of your precious resources that perhaps you don't have a great deal of, but I think as you're going through your planning and your particularly your sort of recovery strategies post-COVID, it is worth, if you can get a bit of time to start thinking about how you're going to use this information and how it can help you. I think you'll see a return on the investment of that time. So I wondered if anyone's got any thoughts at this point about how they might start to use this information to help them with planning, or a couple of you mentioned that you're putting in funding applications, for example. Can you see that how you might be able to use this information to inform that sort of planning?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's this is exactly what I wanted in terms of just the reports themselves would be able to give us, as I'm working with Kevin, so yeah, give us that information that we can really dig down into the wards as well, because it's Gosport at the Diving Museum and there's some real differences in the levels of deprivation there and among different groups as well. So this will really give us a lot of evidence to support that and support what we're planning to do, because we're planning to work with those groups and work with local communities. So it gives us that kind of a rationale for doing it, that we're just not plucking it out of thin air and saying, oh, we want to work with these groups, but actually that's the evidence that these are the groups. And also it links with that you were saying about linking with local data. There's quite a lot of local data about levels of deprivation in the area as well, so it means that we've got that information and we can link this to it as well. So those two things together make a really strong case for us, or enable us to build a strong case with that. So yeah, this is exactly what I was looking for. So I was really pleased when they said they were doing these area reports, I have to say. So yes, Katrina and Stephen, I was like, yes, because I always advocate for these when I do work with people, because I think they're brilliant. So yeah,
fantastic. Thank you, Sonia.
Yeah, just give you a plug.
And it's worth saying, so I've met Kevin and Sonia with their application. That it's great to hear what Sonia's saying there, that anyone looking to come to us for an application, this is invaluable data that you can get to really dig down into who you're currently engaging with. And then, as I said, we really want to see you engage with underserved audiences, so you can really use this data to see who in your local community areas are those underserved groups that you could then try and think, well, how do we try and reach them? So yeah, great to hear, Sonia, and no,
it's perfect.
Other people think about it.
Yeah, I use it all the time, these reports, if people are willing to pay for them, all the time for writing audience development plans or forward planning or strategic documents, because it does really give you that data and gives you that local context to put things in as well, and shows that you are responding to your local area and that what is there. So which is what I always say to people, you need to know what your local area, its profile and who's there, so then you can write plans and policies that respond to that as well. So yeah, so I I always use them where possible, where people are willing to pay for it. So.
Great.
Just to back Sonia up there, I mean, I missed 3/4 of this. I have to apologise. I had a lately or hastily appointment made up with Historic England at the museum, so hence I was supposed to be here for the whole thing, but I'm not sure what the data you come up with. But one good thing that we've done with Gosport Borough Council pre-COVID, every 2 years engaged a survey to understand where all the visitor attractions, where the people came from. So it was relating to Gosport and the rest of the country, where most of the visitors to Gosport were, and they would issue that to us. It allowed all the different venues in Gosport to understand what what sort of people to cater for. In other words, what percentage was local, what percentage came from overseas, what came from a long distance or within a certain radius. It was done by radius, which is very, very interesting. Unfortunately, COVID stopped that at the moment, but hopefully they'll start that up again. But that does help you to understand your local area.
Definitely. And I think that leads us really nicely, actually, Kevin, into thinking about what you might want to consider when you're planning your activities. So, as I was saying before, the area profile reports are, most powerful when you use them alongside other data sets that you might have. So, if you do have information about the people who are currently visiting you, that, use that alongside the population data to see where the gaps are and identify, who you could potentially be reaching that you're not reaching at the moment, and then dig into the information about them to see the best ways to engage with them in terms of what they need, what their preferences are, what might motivate them to engage with you. So, if you're not currently collecting data about the people who are visiting you, I would encourage you to think about how you might do that, so that you can build that understanding and become, really data rich in terms of your understanding of your audiences and where the potential is to develop. Because as I said earlier, all of this will help you to make sure that any programming, any activities that you put in place have the best possible chance of success. So, you can make your the resources that you do have available, both time and money, you can make sure that they're working really hard for you, and you're getting the best out of them. And the other thing to think about is that, with audience development, there are relatively few quick wins. It is an investment in time to develop new audiences, and you don't have to aim everything at everybody all at once, and everything that you do doesn't have to appeal to everybody. So in your development planning, it's thinking about the balance of who you're going to work with to achieve perhaps different strategic priorities that you might have. And all organizations are always in a position of having to balance various different things, whether that's finance with social responsibility, with your ambitions as a museum to perhaps present your collections differently, or take different curatorial approaches to what you do, for example. And different audiences are going to help you achieve those different strands of activity and achieve success with them. So you might target a ticketed opportunity at those groups who are more likely to be in a position to pay for them and more likely to want to pay for them. whereas other activities you might do for free to engage those underrepresented groups who perhaps need a bit more support, to bring them in and to encourage them to take part in different activities. And in thinking about the impacts of COVID, what we have seen is that the most significant factors are age, in terms of the health impacts, the impact on people's finances, and also their existing levels of engagement pre-pandemic. So for the higher engaged groups, they're more likely to be looking for opportunities to engage earlier on, because it's something that's been missing from their life. You know, they're really keen to get back to it. Whereas for the lower engaged groups, all the pandemic really did was further complicate and add more barriers to what they already faced. So again, it's about thinking about what those different groups might need in order to encourage them to visit or engage with you. So really it's a case of layering up all of that different information, and to think about, you know, audience development can happen in a number of different ways. So it could be about increasing your footfall. So you might be looking for more of the same sorts of people in your catchment area. You already know that the offer appeals to them if you know those sorts of people are already visiting. So it's just about, you know, reaching out to the areas that you're not getting people from at the moment. It could be about deepening the relationship with your existing audiences to perhaps bring them on board as supporters or advocates for you. Or it could be about reaching out to entirely new audiences who you don't see at all at the moment, and thinking about what they might need from you. And I think it's always important to think about the fact that you don't need to change what you do or who you are in order to meet the needs of a new audience. It's just about perhaps presenting it slightly differently, or thinking about which elements of it are most likely to be attractive to them. So lots to think about. And I'm aware we've gone through a lot of information quite quickly. But just as a sort of summary of all the things we've looked at this morning, thinking about how you take all of that information and you turn it into a strategy for your future development, identifying where your hotspots and cold spots are, so that you can understand where to focus your efforts, thinking about how your current visitors compare with the population, and you know where the opportunities are to engage with new people, and tap into those opportunities for growth. And I think most importantly is to think about this as a whole team exercise, so everybody is engaged in the process. I'm aware that many of you have quite small teams, but it could be that some people are responsible for marketing, some people are responsible for family programming, or you know, curating your collections. It could be one person who's responsible for all of those things, I'm aware, in the smaller organizations. But all of those different activities have a role to play in developing your audiences. So it's important that they all work together. It's much more likely to be successful if everything sort of lines up and is working towards the same goals. That's it from me, unless anybody's got any questions or thoughts or comments at this point.
I'd just like to sort of echo what Jackie said, and the use of these audience profiles. They're really powerful tools. I used to run a site where we had I think it's a mosaic profiling. They're called active retirement, and we were quite complacent about. We thought we attracted a lot of the older active retirees to our museum. We did a bit of audience profiling and looked at the local area and realised our percentage of visitors were actually, although it was our biggest group, it wasn't as big as the population in the local area. So we were able to, we said, okay, we think we can broaden our appeal to this group, which we thought we were catering for, but I know a third of our audience were in this group, and actually half the population within a 20-minute drive time was that. So just to those bits of information, we did things like maybe better access, more seating, tweaking our program, and also the format of our marketing, and it did have an impact, but it was something we didn't necessarily think it was a problem for us. We thought we needed to go after different audiences, but actually one of our core audiences was underrepresented. So sometimes it's some really obvious things that you don't realise. So I'm not saying that any of you guys are doing this, but it was a bit of a surprise for us. So having that information really helped us.
Excellent. Yeah, that's a great example, Stephen. And I think, you know, when it comes to families as well, you might see a lot of families coming through the door, but there might be all sorts of families in your catchment area that you're not seeing, either because they have younger children and perhaps your programme appears to be aimed at older children, for example, or just because they need a bit more extra support in understanding what to expect from a visit. So yeah, that's a perfect way of looking at it. Thank you, Stephen. See something in the chat. Is that a question or is that a
No, it's not a question. It's just I thought I'd put in the chat some related training that's going to be out in the next few weeks related to marketing and analyzing your audiences. So there's I thought I just put there in the background.
Good question. So I got a question for Katrina and Stephen, if that's okay. The profiles, how do we go about getting them? This is a very practical question, but
yeah, we'll be sending those out. So we'll send out the ones for this area to you who've attended this training. As I said at the beginning, if you want the other areas as well, so if you're on the border and you want Sussex, or you're just keen to know what's happening in Oxfordshire or whatever, we can send those out to you as well. So just give us a shout and we can do that. And Jackie's also going to send us a copy of her slides from today, so we'll send that out as well. Brilliant. And let you know when the recording is available if you'd like to go back and watch it.
Fantastic, thanks.
And just to add to that, if any museums do want to sort of have a chat about or try, you know, have somebody to sort of bounce off ideas going through these profiles, we can help with that as well. So sometimes it's, you know, if unless you're really sort of a stato type person, sometimes it's quite difficult to tweak out some of these things, or you think, is that really true? So I'm happy to talk to the museums in my area. I'm sure Katrina is, and there's other resources as well. So it is actually quite daunting, and because I think we've got what I mean, even if you're a museum in Winchester, you'd probably be interested in the South Hampshire stuff and possibly Berkshire and other areas, and vice versa. So there's quite a lot of data there, which we can provide our sort of A-level knowledge of marketing to help that. So do have a look, but we can you know, we can chew the fat together over it and make some suggestions if you want some. Otherwise, if you've got a friendly stato in your organisation who loves this sort of stuff, we would be interested to hear what you make of it.
Fantastic. And just to very briefly go through the final slides, which just have our contact information and my direct email if you've got any questions, and also those links that I mentioned to other sources and resources that you might find useful, including the participation monitor findings, which I would recommend you have a look at. They're being updated very regularly as each new wave of information comes through, so you can see the changing picture in terms of what people are up to post-COVID. Thank you very much.